Welcome to another episode of Leadership Lessons. My guest today is Dr. Paul Chitwood, and we're going to talk about the last of the unreached. Dr. Chitwood, thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Hey, thank you. It's a privilege to be on with you, Dr. Gray. Thank the Lord for you and for Kentucky Baptists.
Well, thank you for that. Let me tell you all about Paul Chitwood. Paul was elected president of the IMB in November of 2018. He previously served as executive director of the Kentucky Baptist Convention, and before that as pastor of several local churches in Kentucky. He was an IMB trustee from 2002 to 2010, including 2 years as board chairman. Dr. Chitwood is a native of Jellicoe, Tennessee. He's a graduate of Cumberland College, earned an MDiv and PhD from the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary here in Louisville, where he also served on the faculty, and he holds a master's in nonprofit administration from the University of Notre Dame. He and his wife, Michelle, have 4 children, and they are a friend to Kentucky Baptist. We're grateful for them and grateful, Dr. Chitwood, for your ministry at the International Mission Board. So let's jump right into these questions. You're a friend of Kentucky Baptist. Give us an update on how you're doing and how things are going for you at the IMB.
Well, I'm thrilled to do that, and I'll start by saying things must be going pretty well because there was a Kentucky Baptist gal who kissed me goodbye when I left the house this morning. My wife, Michelle's born in Kentucky, and she's still happily married to me, even though I've been IMB president almost 5 years now. I dropped off at school a Kentucky Baptist gal who is now a 6th grader. And she was Sunrise Girl, part of the ministry of Kentucky Baptist, is caring for those kids. We were her foster parents and then adopted her from state of Kentucky when we moved to Virginia. And Lily is, she lost her volleyball game last night, but she's playing well and she's doing well. So for the Chitwoods, things are great. Other kids flourishing. Also, the work of the IMB has been a bit of a turnaround project, to say the least, but the Lord has given favor. And we have seen things turn around in a great way. The candidate pipeline that was in about the 300s when I came here is now consistently over 1,250 over the last several weeks. So we've seen a quadrupling of the number of people applying to go as Southern Baptist missionaries through the IMB. We had our best financial year in the history of the organization this past year, a good strong year coming together again this year. So the work around the world is challenging these days, as it always has been, but God has given a harvest. And so we're just incredibly grateful, Todd.
Well, Dr. Chitwood, I mean, Southern Baptists are all about cooperation, and you lead the way in that. You make it easy for churches to want to fund the work that is happening at the International Mission Board. So thank you for your leadership there. You posted recently on social media about the earthquake in Morocco. Could you just share with us some of the information about the devastation and loss of life there and how Southern Baptists are responding to that?
Well, it is devastating and just terrible to watch the news reports unfolding. Thankfully, because Southern Baptists worked together, we were able to respond. In fact, within hours of the earthquake happening, relief efforts were beginning to take place with our national partners there in the area through Send Relief, which is internationally is IMB's Southern Baptist work, and how thankful we are for that. Nationally, that's Work North American Mission Board. Send Relief is that partnership that we have with NAM to make compassion ministry as easy and effective as we can for Southern Baptists. Our Send Relief Vice President for the international side, Jason Cox, arrived in Morocco yesterday. We have some videos they're already posting, him just showing the devastation, but also the work to help bring hope into such a hopeless situation. One of the sound bites from yesterday that just captured me and communicates the extent of the loss. Jason was in a mountaintop village. You could see nothing but rubble behind him, and said at the bottom of the hill, they told us not to come up here because there was no one left up here alive. The entire village just crumbled to the ground. And, you know, there's no rebar in most of those block and concrete homes. And so literally everything just caves in and crushes everything under it. So loss of life in the thousands. It will continue to grow. The need for food, for clean water, shelter is great. Southern Baptists are responding generously already, and we thank God for that. And with every bit of that help, we intentionally communicate the hope of Christ.
Yeah, thank you for your leadership there, and we're grateful for Send Relief, and it's good to be able to say to churches, you're in Morocco too. You're there helping folks right now during their time of need. Dr. Chitwood, we want to talk about the last of the unreached, and so let's define some terms. When we say a group of people is unreached with the gospel, exactly what do we mean? What do we mean by that?
Yeah, there are a couple of terms that we often use when we're talking about missions: unreached and unengaged. So let's start with unreached, but I want to cover unengaged too. Okay. If you were a part of a people group who was unreached, there would be not a great likelihood that as you interact with people who are like you and in your part of the world, that you're going to interact with a believer, because an unreached people group is one of 7,000 people groups that remain in the world that are less than 2% evangelical Christian. So it's about 12,000 people groups in the world that have been numbered by researchers. 7,000 remain unreached. Now, when you talk about, 2%, evangelical Christians. So you're telling me that if you're 2%, you're reached? No, that people group is not reached. However, there is a witness among, if there's 2%, there is a witness among those people. So missiologists have used that as sort of a standard to say, well, if you're less than 2%, you're definitely unreached. But then there's another term that we use, Dr. Gray, and that is unengaged. What does it mean to be unengaged? Well, let's say you live among unengaged people. You have maybe heard something on the radio or seen something on the internet about Jesus. And so you decide you're going to go to church Sunday and maybe have the opportunity to hear the gospel preached. But if you live among unengaged people, that's not possible for you because there's no church yet among your people. It's very unlikely that you're going to run into a missionary who's there if you're walking through your village this morning or tonight through your city or community, and might have the likelihood of running into somebody who's there to share the gospel with you. It's not going to happen because, as far as we know, there's no one strategically engaging those people groups yet. There's 3,072 remaining unreached and unengaged people groups. So of the 7,000 unreached, 3,072 are unengaged with the gospel. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal biblically because we know what heaven's going to look like someday. Yeah. Revelation 7, 9, and 10, John was able to see heaven as it would someday be, and what John said he saw was a great multitude that no one can number from every nation and from all the tribes, peoples, and languages standing before the throne and before the Lamb. They're not there yet because they're still unreached and unengaged peoples, and that's why we're still here. Still, the church is still on earth with a mission in front of her.
Why we give, why we work together. It's why we cooperate as Southern Baptists. A recent stat showed that IMB has reached 93 new people groups in 2022. So when it says we've reached, does that mean that group has now gone to that 2% threshold? Is that kind of what it's communicating, or?
That's right. With the amount of work that is being done, they've reached the 2% threshold. We also number the people groups each year that are engaged for the first time, and are constantly pressing to get greater engagement with the unengaged.
Okay. So you've launched a new program called Project 3000 to take the gospel to the rest of these groups, this 7,000 groups, 3,072 of which are unengaged. Tell us about Project 3000 and what you've seen happen so far.
So we're very excited about Project 3000. There was a hike recently in the mountains outside of the Richmond area. Go a little west of here over towards your neck of the woods, Dr. Gray, and you can find some pretty good sized mountains. There's a 25-mile hike that was undertaken by some of the newest Southern Baptist missionaries who are training here in Richmond, Virginia, to go share the gospel. Why were they hiking 25 miles in the mountains of western Virginia? They're preparing for what they're going to be doing when they go overseas, because they are one of the Project 3000 explorers. What we've done is create 300 new jobs at the IMB. Each one of the people who's in those jobs will be assigned 10 of the remaining 3,072 UUPGs, unreached and unengaged people groups. The job of that explorer is to go find her 10, go find his 10. And when they find them, hopefully they'll be able to get access to them, although that can be very difficult and be challenged. As we say, there's a reason people remain unengaged to this day with the gospel and unreached. There are many barriers. But as they will attempt to make contact with them, they'll also be looking for national partners who can join them and gain greater access to those lost peoples, and then hopefully create a strategy where our longer-term career missionaries can begin to engage those peoples. We're terribly excited about this because it is an intentional way for us as Southern Baptists to finish the task, to work towards getting the gospel to those who have not heard. We're also excited about it because it really is mobilizing some segment of our Southern Baptist church members who haven't maybe been as intrigued by mission work as they find this intriguing. This is getting to the edge. This is hard work. This is difficult. These are the special ops folks. And so this is capturing the imagination of a lot of young men and some young ladies who want to go be a part of this. It's a 2-year assignment to each person who's involved. And we already have seen deployments in this area. We have some of those explorers who are out working already. Another group, in fact, we're having commissioning service tomorrow, where those who took the recent hike I was talking about, they'll be commissioned, and within a few weeks from now, they'll find themselves on the mission field. And the recruiting pipeline is growing every day with people who are expressing interest.
What are the basic qualifications, Dr. Chitwood, for someone who would fit that role? What education do they need to have? What background? What would you look for?
So they need to be physically fit. They need to be spiritually mature. They need to be mobile, able to travel, able to go. They need to be culturally sensitive. They need to be gospel patrons. They need to be passionate about sharing their faith. We are typically looking for someone who falls in that range of what a journeyman assignment, a 2-year assignment tradition with the IMB looks like, fully funded. This will be fully funded, but someone 21 to 30 who's no kids yet because of the travel and you know, the extreme conditions, hiking, mountainous areas, what have you. So even as I say 21 to 30, you know, we have some flexibility on our side. We have a 20-year-old who's a part of this group, so the lower end of that is not hard and fast, nor is the upper end. We have a lady in her 40s who deployed recently, who went out to be one of those explorers. But again, it's an assignment that's not a traditional assignment. You're not going to go be in one place. You're going to be a researcher. You're going to be a traveler. You're going to be an investigator, and you're going to have to be able to take care of yourself to a large extent and do so under some harsh and challenging conditions.
Sounds like y'all need to set up a booth at the Army's career day when some of those special ops soldiers are getting ready to retire and finish up their term with Green Beret or 160th or whatever like that. That's exciting. Kind of like the Pony Express of the Southern Baptist Convention. It sounds like that you have a certain qualification.
Getting out there to the edge.
Dr. Chitwood, once a group is, quote, reached, what happens next? How do missionaries go about planning a church, getting a work going that can be, you know, reproducing, advancing the gospel as a missionary moves on out? What happens once a group starts becoming engaged? Tell us a little bit about the process of trying to see the gospel advance in a place.
Well, what your question has just described, even in the way you worded it, is the core missionary task, where we talk about entry, evangelism, discipleship, church planning, leadership development, exit to partnership. So we have a very intentional strategy that we undertake as we engage with unengaged peoples, as we seek to reach the unreached, where we have a missionary presence established, and that's where it starts. You know, we talk at the IMB about the world's greatest problem. It's lostness. The solution God has given us, it's the gospel. And yet, how does the gospel get to those who haven't heard it? You look biblically at that. Well, a missionary takes it. So the importance of a missionary presence, a missionary going to engage lost soul entry, and then sharing the gospel, evangelism, as people come to faith, discipling them, ensuring that we don't just have people pray prayers and then we walk away and go to the next person. No, we want them as maturing disciples who then, as we work with them, can be brought together into a church. Our ultimate goal is to leave a gospel-centered Baptistic church wherever we have been or wherever we are. And that work will carry on, that church will carry on the work among those people, hopefully until, as a multiplying church, until Jesus comes and claims his bride. But we also understand once leaders are developed, there comes a time for what we call exit to partnership. And so we step out or step aside and let the church do what God's called the church to do. Let national believers lead and take the reins. We stay in contact and hopefully have partnerships where we can help them begin to send cross-culturally and get the gospel to other parts of the world. That's the job of every church. But that's the way the system works. And we train specifically for this, for all of our missionaries, and even those who come on volunteer trips with us, they'll often be introduced to the language of the core missionary task and to the part of the work that they'll be doing on the core missionary task while they are there.
Yeah, very exciting. So when we report that roughly 3,650 missionaries last year working with their local partners saw 21,000 churches planted, 102,000 baptisms. Those partners, tell us who those partners are, and we know those missionaries didn't plant 21,000 churches themselves, so explain a little bit of how we reach that 21,000 number. Who are these partners? How do we keep that partnership going? Sounds like they're local churches. They're churches that got started by a missionary and they're now a partner.
That's exactly what it is. Oftentimes, the beautiful thing about being a part of the Southern Baptist family is that it's a family that's been around a while, 178 years. We're 178th year. And you look back over this legacy of Southern Baptist for 178 years, sending missionaries. I mean, that was the first thing we did out of the gate. And at this point, we've sent about 25,000. Southern Baptists have sent about 25,000 missionaries through the IMB over those 178 years. But you look at the legacy of that work, where those missionaries have gone out and worked in the core missionary task, seen believers discipled, churches started. A lot of the work we have also done is help churches partner together. So there are 140 Baptist conventions and unions around the world that Southern Baptists, to a large extent, have been responsible for starting, and many of them are flourishing work now. The Brazilian Baptist Convention, for example, that's one of the best missionary sending partners that we have at the IMB. Just a month or so ago, I was in Korea working with the Korean Baptist Convention. They have their own foreign mission board. My goodness, they're doing a tremendous work around the world. We're partnering with them around the world in that work. But among those 140 Baptist conventions and unions, we have a lot of relationships where our missionaries are working alongside of those churches and those missionaries. And anywhere an IMB missionary is working and has eyes on the work of Baptist partners who are in the area and are able to verify that work, and they're doing that in partnership with us, then we count. We count the churches that are planted. We count the gospel shares. We count the professions of faith. We count the baptisms. Now, thank God, there's a lot more people out there sharing the gospel than we're in partnership with. A lot more churches being started every year than just what we count at the IMB. But we are proud to be able to celebrate with Southern Baptists, where we have our eyes on the work, hey, this is the return on the investment that you're making as you give through the cooperative programs, you give through the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, as you send your missionaries through the IMB and pray for all of those missionaries. We want you to know the impact that you're making. And so, again, to your comment, our 3,500, 3,600 missionaries did not plant 21,000 churches last year, but in partnership with their Baptist partners all over the world where they were involved in the work in some way, we're celebrating the harvest that God is giving.
Well, that's exciting. I'm thankful to get to be part of it, thankful to get to ring the bell for the funding of it, and if I could spend the rest of my days doing that, it'd be a life, I think, well invested for the Lord. Dr. Chitwood, can you tell us just a great IMB impact story that describes a little bit of what you've referred to as the missionary core, the
missionary task.
Missionary task. Any place that you are aware of in history where a missionary showed up, a church was planted, that church is reproduced? Any story that would be helpful for our listeners?
And let me tell you about one that I think would be certainly strike a chord with one of the events of the world that's taking place right now. We've all been watching over the last year and a half the tragedy that's unfolding in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Regardless of the politics of the war or where a person is on the politics of the war, as believers, I think we would want to celebrate what God is doing even in the midst of this war. So Southern Baptists have been working in Ukraine for a few decades now. Mm-hmm. When the opportunity to go in opened up, historically, we took advantage of that opportunity. We established a work there. And that work has been a strong work. Ukrainians responsive to the gospel. We had seen many churches planted there and those churches maturing. So much so that we were able to help start a seminary there that was training pastors and just a good, strong, solid work. And our missionaries were continuing alongside of Ukrainian Baptists, helping spread the gospel inside Ukraine, but also working with the Baptist Union of Ukraine and helping them start their own foreign mission board and send their own missionaries. When the war started, because one of our IMB missionaries had discipled a young man, evangelized him, discipled him, helped him mature in the faith, he ultimately became the head of the foreign mission sending arm of the Ukrainian Baptist Union, working in partnership with us. They had placed over 20 missionaries outside of Ukraine. So the war begins. We had about 30 IMB folk who were living in Ukraine, had to retreat out of Ukraine because of the danger, the unpredictability, everything that was happening. But the believers who were left behind, the churches, the seminary, and now our missionaries able to make contact back in, providing support and help along the way. One of our missionaries who had spent 15 years living in Ukraine, who's now facilitating work in and out of Ukraine, I'll put it like that, told me just a couple weeks ago, God is doing something in Ukraine that we've never seen him do. Churches are being started right now in Ukraine. Wow. It's a war. Mm-hmm. People are coming to faith. He said it's like an awakening is happening across Ukraine in the midst of this war. So it's a beautiful thing to see how an investment that Southern Baptists made over the course of the last few decades is now paying dividend where literally every day is a life and death situation. And if you die apart from Christ, you go to hell. Mm-hmm. But there are people preaching the gospel all throughout those cities that are being bombed relentlessly every day, and people are coming to faith. And I'm sure that there have been those, unfortunately, who have lost their lives in this war, who are going to be in heaven because of the work that Southern Baptists have been doing there and are doing there, and the work that Ukrainian Baptists, who we've helped get to where they are today, are doing right now.
So if you told that story at any Kentucky Baptist church, they'd take a love offering and send money to help somebody. Our problem has never been cash. It's usually communication. How do you get the word out of what's happening? what's been effective for you all during your time to better, more effectively tell the story so that Southern Baptists know what they're supporting? They can cut through all the mess that's happening everywhere else. I don't like this, don't like this, but I love this, and I want to fund it. What's been helpful to communicate the story, Dr. Chitwood?
Well, it had to start internally with us. So you used a phrase there. It's not been cash, always been communication. I would affirm that. The way I've tried to communicate that to our IMB family internally is our problem was never revenue, it was relationship. We don't have a revenue problem at the IMB. You say, well, yeah, you had a pretty big revenue problem. You lost 2,000 frontline missionaries, and you struggled to keep afloat. No, it was never a revenue problem. It was a relationship problem, because Southern Baptists aren't broke, and Southern Baptists haven't lost their heart for the nations. But our failure to be in relationship with them and to communicate with them, as you said, has been the greatest failure. So what have we been doing about that? We've been trying to do our job. We've been trying to renew relationships, build relationships, communicate more effectively. We have rebuilt a mobilization team here at the organization where we're working better with our state convention partners, our association partners, local Baptist Association partners, pastors and missions pastors, and setting the IMB back in front of Southern Baptist churches. We are also, just in terms of, we've built a marketing and communication team where we are capturing those stories and telling the story of what God is doing among the nations. Perfect example of that is day before yesterday, our Send Relief Vice President was in Greece, reached out to me. I guess it was over the weekend. Reached out to me and said, hey, do I need to try to get to Morocco? I said, go now to Morocco. And we're sending a videographer to meet you there because we need to be able to tell Southern Baptists about the needs and let them see what's happening here, but also what they're already doing to meet those needs. And so by yesterday, we have videos being posted today to tell that story. Again, as you say, it's a way of communicating. My goodness, what God has done through Southern Baptists over 178 years, what God has done this week through Southern Baptists around the world. You think about just the example of some of the things I've talked about just now. We're there in Morocco. We're there in Ukraine. We're there in Georgia. They're still recovering from the hurricane. I could go on and on. Global hunger offering funds are being used today. Feed starving Africans who are in parts of Africa. You have a decades-long drought and famine, and people are dying. But Southern Baptists are delivering bread and the bread of life. That's happening all over the world. And this is the result of what happens when we work together, but also we have to tell that story. Because as you said, Southern Baptists here, Kentucky Baptists here, they want to be a part of that, even in an even greater way.
Dr. Chitwood, you know Kentucky Baptists are committed to our cooperation, CP, Cooperative Program Giving. Could you take a minute and thank Kentucky Baptists for the Cooperative Program Giving and just tell us how it's making a difference?
Oh, it's my joy to do that. So let me start by saying this. When we talk about the Layman Christmas offering at the IMB, we're able to give the assurance to Kentucky Baptist, Southern Baptist. Every penny of that is used on the front line of the mission field. Why can we say that? I mean, what about my job here in Richmond? What about the training center where those missionary explorers are preparing to go? Well, the cooperative program covers that. But most of the cooperative program dollars that come to the IMB are not used for support work here in the U.S. Most of those dollars go to the front line of the mission field as well. In fact, 60% of the CP dollars that come to the IMB go to the front line of the mission field, just like those Lottie offering dollars. Now, we have to have a good support system for those missionaries, and that covers the rest of the balance of the CP. But what I would say to Kentucky Baptists, who are incredibly generous in cooperative program giving, is thank you. I'd also want to give you the reassurance that there's a very high accountability for every one of those dollars. I know at the KBC because I was there and I know who's there now, but it's also true at the IMB. So we hope that you are confident enough in what we are doing and how we're doing it, that you want to continue to give generously and even grow. Because listen, the problem of lostness that CP addresses is not a shrinking problem, it's a growing problem. More people will die lost today than on any day upon which the sun has risen or set in human history. But we know the solution to the problem. We have the gospel. How do we get the gospel to them? By working together. And the cooperative program is, as others have observed, the fuel that funds the mission.
Dr. Chitwood, you've been, Lord's seen fit to keep you in leadership for a long, long time. I used to think that the job I was doing prepared me for the next job. I've since learned that it prepared me for my resume for the next job, prepared me for the interview for the next job. The next job was going to be a stretch and walking on water just like the last one was. In your time with IMB since 2018, what is, just pick out one leadership principle maybe that has served you really well during your time there so far?
Well, I had several in mind.
You can say 2, 3.
Yeah, and I won't elaborate, but I'll just say the need to trust the Lord and His sovereign hand. It's His work, and to seek to be faithful with what He entrusts to me, but to trust Him. The need to show respect. So many of the problems we run into in SBC life, and even in organizational life, really never get to critical level if we are respectful to one another, if we hear one another, if we listen to one another, if we we may not always agree on everything, but when a man or woman feels respected, even when we disagree, we can stay together. So that's huge. I think, the last thing I'll say is just the need to walk with the Lord. That protects us from a world of ills and such great risk of fall. If we're walking with the Lord, there's so many problems that my wife won't ever have to address with me, or my board won't ever have to address with me, or a pastor or a state exec won't ever have to address me if I'm walking with the Lord. So that's my counsel to myself every day, and to brothers and sisters around me. You walk with the Lord.
Dr. Chitwood, thank you for your leadership at IMB. I can speak on behalf of, I think, almost every Kentucky Baptist, say we're grateful for you, and we're grateful for how you're leading our International Mission Board, and we're confident in it and confident in you and excited about what's happening. Thank you for your ministry, and thank you for joining Leadership Lessons.
Hey, it's a privilege to be on with you again, Dr. Gray. I thank God for you and for Kentucky Baptists.